Hello, Bishop Moore. Welcome back for our next discussion. So this week, as you've seen, we've been recording a lot of videos about prayer. So I have an excellent group of your faculty and staff here who's here to share a little bit with you about prayer. We're going to give you a lot of practical tips and practical advice, because I know prayer is sometimes something that we all realize it's important. We all want it in our lives. Sometimes it's kind of hard. Like, we have obstacles, we have struggles. We're not exactly sure how to do that in our lives. So we have a great bunch of people here who's going to share a little bit about their own prayer lives. Like, what have they learned? What have they discovered? So first and foremost, what are maybe some obstacles that you've had in your own prayer life as you've tried to establish that relationship with the Lord?
So I'm a very perfectionistic person, just in my temperament. And so I feel like everything that I do has to be perfect. So I have to fight against that, especially in a spiritual life, because what I'll tend to do is think that if my prayer wasn't perfect, or if I don't have the exact right words, or if I don't pray the novena in its full 9 days or something, that I've automatically become this failure. And I've had to kind of learn and grow in the fact that all of those things are not what the Lord wants from me. He just wants a conversation from me. He just wants my heart. And so that's just been such a consolation to me, because now I've kind of grown to know that I'll sit down and just have that conversation. A priest said to me one time in confession, like, even if you're just having your coffee outside and you're looking around and enjoying the nature that's around you, that's your prayer. And so all of those things have kind of helped me relax a little bit and just sit with the Lord and allow him to share in what's going on in my heart.
It's important when you face the challenge of distraction in prayer to keep in mind that it can be a negative and it can be a positive sometimes. So in the beginning of the spiritual life, when we're first starting out in our prayer life, it's very important to kind of be proactive and keep those distractions away, so that way we can focus on whatever it is we're coming to pray about, whatever prayer activity we're doing, if it's Lectio Divina, if it's going to Mass, etc., to really make a conscious effort to not be distracted, especially if there's some nagging thing that keeps coming back, like something down the road that's maybe you're worried about or concerned about, maybe say a quick prayer about that, but then to refocus yourself back on spiritual growth, back on being in union with the Lord. But then typically as the spiritual life deepens and as the years go by and you get better and better at prayer, the ability to push those distractions away, of course, will grow as well. And you don't have to think about it so much. And then it can become an opportunity. You can use kind of those nagging things, those things that just kind of won't go away. Those oftentimes are places where the Lord is pointing you to focus on something, either on a part of your moral life that you need to rectify, or some kind of behavior, or some kind of thought process that needs to be kind of redeemed and made better. And so rather than being a distraction, a lot of times when we've grown close to the Lord, he will kind of point something out to us in our prayer life that we need to focus on.
I get distracted a lot in prayer too, actually. So that was a good one. And, part of what Kelly was sharing about this perfectionist prayer, that's something that I struggle with as well. And kind of just understanding and believing this truth that God wants us to bring our hearts exactly as they are and to come as we are, which is flawed, which is, with whatever's happening in our life at that time, that we don't have to wait until we've got it all together to bring it to God. He certainly knows better than anyone that we don't. So he desires for us to come in that way, and he wants to speak to us in those places in our hearts. And I've kind of found for me that instead of wanting to go there when, it's those places that are most vulnerable, I tend to keep myself really busy. So an additional struggle for me in prayer is just busyness. And it's not necessarily with things that are bad, but it's things that keep me from connecting with the Lord. So I can keep my calendar full all day, and then I can convince myself that the 5-minute window I have right now isn't enough time to offer a good enough prayer. So I may not pray during that time because I've convinced myself that it's not enough. And really, God just desires for me in those moments that I have to reach out to him and to also make some very intentional time for him at different parts of the day.
Yeah, Amanda, I really connect and resonate with what you're saying about bringing our hearts to God as they are. One of the best pieces of advice I ever got on prayer was from Father Mark Toops, and he gave this analogy that your heart is like a house. And in our houses, we have rooms we don't let people into, like the room where we keep all our junk we don't want people to see, or the room, where it's not decorated very well and it's half finished. And we just close those doors and we entertain people nicely in the rooms that are decorated well. And that's what we do with God. We have these places in our heart that we don't let him see. But Father Mark said this, the secret is your house doesn't have any roof on it, and God can see all the rooms at once. So I think for me, it's been really helpful in prayer to grow over time gently into just being more vulnerable, just like you said, Amanda, and having the courage and the trust to bring to God what's really going on in my heart, what's really going on in my life. And sometimes that meant having the courage to feel those things for myself and be aware and admit to myself, what is my reality? I think it's important to realize that God doesn't work so well in our heads, but he works really well in our reality. So if we pay attention to what we're experiencing in our day, it gives us a lot of good stuff to bring to God. And oftentimes the things that we least want to talk about or the things that we least want to feel is exactly where God is waiting for us. So those things that are very painful, maybe places where we feel afraid, where we feel very ashamed, those are the places that God really wants to speak to us the most. So overcoming that obstacle of being honest and being real with God has been really a long journey, but a really beautiful and fruitful one for me.
I know for me, another obstacle that I've had is finding like the good times to pray that work for who I am. I think sometimes like we can have this idea that our what we should be doing in prayer is always so much more than what we can do. Kind of like you said, Amanda, like that we're very busy, and we notice that we look at our schedule, like when can I pray? And oftentimes we can get very discouraged in that, where we see, oh, like I really wish that I could do a holy hour every day. Or I really wish I could spend like every morning I wake up, have this time. And practically, like we can't, like, we have so much happening. I know so many have families, like they're just practically, you can't spend every single moment in prayer. I know for me, for a while, like I kept coming to confession with that. I'm like, Lord, like I keep messing up. And then one day, an incredible priest told me, find ways to pray that of course push me a little bit, but are natural to who I am. Looking at like prayers, like naturally, what do I love? Like what really draws me to the Lord? Because prayer isn't supposed to be a chore, something that is forced upon us, but it's that moment with our best friend who simply wants to be with us. We have those moments like with our friends around us. Like it's never a chore. It's something that brings us life and brings us joy. And I noticed those times where I was like almost trying to meet this expectation I had that God didn't put on me. I had put on myself of like, all right, I do a rosary every day. I need to do the divine office every day. And the Lord's like, no, you don't necessarily need to do every single thing. You don't need to do all these huge things. What I want from you is your heart. So let's take a step back and really look at, where is your heart drawing you closer to me?